Imagine arriving at a quiet roadside inn in 1847, tired from the road, your horse worn out, the Kentucky air heavy and still. Two smiling sisters greet you at the door. Warm food, soft beds, gentle voices. A place called Millbrook Inn, safe, peaceful, welcoming. Now imagine that weeks later, someone digging behind that same inn uncovers a grave. Then another, and another, until the number reaches 43. This is the story of the Cunningham Sisters and the 43 graves of Millbrook in Kentucky. And trust me, the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Before we step inside this story, if you're drawn to forgotten crimes, hidden history, and chilling mysteries that feel almost unreal, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Night Archive. It truly helps the channel grow, and it tells me you want more stories like this. Kentucky in the 1840s was a place of movement. Travelers passed through constantly. Traders, farmers, horse buyers, men carrying cash in their coat pockets, gold coins tucked into saddlebags. The roads weren't as empty as you might imagine, but they were isolated enough that if someone disappeared, it could take weeks for anyone to notice. Millbrook Inn sat along one of those roads. It wasn't grand, it wasn't famous, but it had something even more powerful. It felt personal. The inn was run by the Cunningham Sisters. Quiet, polite, soft-spoken. They weren't the kind of women who drew attention. In fact, that may have been the point. Guests described them as warm and attentive. They remembered the way the sisters smiled, the way they leaned in slightly when speaking, the way they made a weary traveler feel seen. And that's where the story begins to twist, because over time, rumors started to spread. Not loud rumors, not accusations shouted in town squares, just whispers. A man who had passed through Millbrook never arrived at his destination. Another who had been seen riding toward the inn was never seen again. Families waited for letters that never came. Business partners grew uneasy when scheduled meetings were missed. At first, it was blamed on the road. Highway robbers existed. Accidents happened. Rivers overflowed. Horses stumbled. The frontier was unpredictable, but patterns have a way of surfacing. Some locals began to notice that many of the missing men had one thing in common. They had been seen at Millbrook Inn shortly before they vanished. Still, no one wanted to believe it. Two women running a small inn. It felt impossible. Society in the 1840s did not easily imagine women as predators. That blind spot would become a shield. As the story goes, the Cunningham sisters had a method. A simple one. They offered comfort, conversation, sometimes even flirtation. A tired traveler far from home could mistake kindness for affection, and affection for safety. Guests were given rooms upstairs, a meal, perhaps a drink, something warm before bed. And then, sometime during the night, something would happen. Different versions of the legend describe different methods. Some say poison, some say suffocation, some whisper about a trapdoor or hidden entry. What remains consistent across accounts is this: many who checked in never checked out. And here, where it becomes even more unsettling. The property behind Millbrook Inn was quiet, overgrown, easy to overlook. No fences marking neat family plots, no carved headstones, just land, soft earth. For years, nothing was officially discovered. Life moved on. Travelers kept coming. The sisters kept smiling, until suspicion finally reached the right ears. One version of the story says a relative of a missing man refused to let the matter rest. Another says a former guest grew uneasy after surviving an odd night at the inn and alerted authorities. However it happened, an investigation began. Quietly at first, when officials searched the property, they weren't expecting what they found. The first body may have been dismissed as coincidence, a tragic accident buried in secrecy. But when they kept digging, and another appeared, and then another, the soil itself began to tell a story. 43 graves, 43 human remains reportedly uncovered behind Millbrook Inn. Imagine the silence as each body was brought up from the earth. The shock moving through the small Kentucky community. The realization that the gentle innkeepers had possibly been orchestrating something unthinkable. The idea of two sisters luring travelers with warmth and then ending their lives feels almost too cinematic to be real. And that's why this story has survived so long. But here's where we need to pause. Historical records from the mid-1800s are not always clear. Frontier journalism often blurred fact and rumor. Stories were exaggerated. Details were added over time. Some historians question whether all 43 graves were directly connected to the sisters. Others believe the number became part of local folklore, growing with each retelling. What we do know is that fear surrounding Millbrook Inn became very real. The Cunningham name became tied to disappearance and death. Picture the trial, if you can. A small courtroom, wooden benches, neighbors staring, whispers moving like wind through dry grass. The sisters sitting side by side, faces calm, or maybe unreadable. How do you even defend against something like that? In the 1840s, forensic science did not exist the way it does today. Evidence relied on testimony, on circumstance, on what could be seen with the naked eye. If bodies were found on your property, that alone could shape your fate. Some accounts claim the sisters were convicted. Others suggest parts of the story may have been reshaped by sensational newspapers hungry for shocking headlines. The truth sits somewhere between documented fact and dark legend. And maybe that uncertainty is what makes this story linger. Because whether the number was exactly 43 or not, whether every grave was tied directly to them or not, something happened at Millbrook Inn that left a permanent stain on local memory. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable idea. Evil does not always look like a villain from a storybook. It can look like kindness, like hospitality, like a soft voice saying, "You must be tired. Come inside." Imagine being one of those travelers, the long ride, the relief of reaching a warm doorway, the sound of boots on wooden floors, the flicker of candlelight, trust forming in seconds. Trust is powerful, and once given, it is difficult to take back. The Cunningham sisters, if the legends are true, understood human nature. They understood loneliness. They understood how far from home a man might feel on a dark Kentucky road. And that understanding may have been their greatest weapon. Stories like this remind us how vulnerable travel once was. No cell phones, no quick check-ins, no digital trail. If someone vanished between towns, they could disappear into history. Millbrook Inn eventually faded. The land changed hands, buildings aged, but the story remained, passed down in whispers, told around fireplaces, written into local lore. 43 graves. Even if the exact number has been debated, it represents something larger. It represents how easily trust can be manipulated, how communities can overlook warning signs when they don't fit expectations. And there's another layer here. The fascination with the Cunningham sisters reflects society's shock at female perpetrators. At the time, women were expected to nurture, to host, to provide comfort. The idea that those same traits could be used to harm felt almost impossible to accept. That disbelief may have allowed the story to unfold for as long as it did. When you drive through quiet towns today, it's hard not to imagine what once stood there, what secrets the soil might still hold. Millbrook Inn may no longer welcome travelers, but its story continues to travel on its own. At Night Archive, we explore stories like this not to glorify darkness, but to understand it, to look at the spaces where history and legend overlap, to question what we think we know. Because sometimes the most chilling stories aren't about monsters hiding in forests. They're about ordinary doors, ordinary smiles, ordinary places. And if this story made you pause, if it made you picture that lonely Kentucky road in 1847, then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think all 43 graves were truly connected to the Cunningham sisters? Or do you believe the number grew as the legend spread? Let me know in the comments. Your perspective might open up a whole new angle on this case. If you found this story fascinating, share it with someone who loves historical mysteries. These are the kinds of stories that spark late-night conversations. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Night Archive so you don't miss the next forgotten crime or buried secret. because history is full of doors that look harmless, and sometimes the most dangerous places are the ones that invite you in.